ফ্রেন্ডস, আজকের লাস্ট দিন আমাদের ট্রিপের। আজকে আমরা যাচ্ছি ইয়র্কে। রাস্তায় এই দেখো ভেড়া চলছে। আমাদের দেশে লোকজন বলে গরু চলে, আর এদের দেশে চারিদিকে ভেড়া চলে, বুঝতে পারলে? আচ্ছা, আজকের ট্রিপটা নিয়ে আমরা কথা বলছি। আজকে আমরা কোথায় কোথায় যাব দিব্যেন্দু?
হ্যালো ফ্রেন্ডস, আজকে আমাদের ট্রিপের লাস্ট দিন। আজকে আমরা কুইডিপি থেকে বেরিয়ে চলে যাচ্ছি এখন ইয়র্কে। ইয়র্ক ইংল্যান্ডের ওয়ান অফ দ্য মোস্ট ফেমাস শহর এবং খুব হিস্টোরিক্যালি ইম্পর্ট্যান্ট। তো আমি জাস্ট 2 মিনিট নেব ছোটো করে বলার জন্য যে ইয়র্কটা কী এবং কেন এত বিখ্যাত। বেসিক্যালি ইয়র্ক জায়গাটায় প্রথম এসেছিল হচ্ছে ভাইকিংরা, এবং না সরি ভুল বললাম, ইয়র্কে প্রথম এসেছিল রোমানরা। তো রোমান সভ্যতার আর কি ওখানে অংশ আছে। আমরা ইতিহাসে বইতে পড়েছিলাম যে কনস্ট্যান্টাইন বেসিক্যালি ইয়র্ক আর কি প্রথম এসেছিল, এবং রোমান সভ্যতা যাওয়ার পর ওখানে ভাইকিংরা এসেছিল, এবং ভাইকিংরা কয়েকশো বছর পড়ার পর ওখানে বেসিক্যালি অ্যাংলো সেকশনরা এসেছিল। তো ইয়র্ক এমন একটা জায়গা যেখানে রোমান আর্কিটেকচার, ভাইকিং আর্কিটেকচার এবং ইংলিশ আর্কিটেকচার সবগুলো পাওয়া যাবে। এবং জায়গাটা খুবই একটা ছোট জায়গা, এবং তার মধ্যেই অসংখ্য ইম্পর্টেন্ট হিস্টোরিক্যাল ল্যান্ডমার্ক। তো মানে বলা হয় যে ওয়ার্ল্ডস মোস্ট ডেন্স হিস্টোরিক্যাল ল্যান্ডমার্কস হচ্ছে ইয়র্কে আছে। প্লাস ইয়র্কের রাস্তাগুলো হচ্ছে কোবল স্টোনের রাস্তা, তো সেটাও আর কি আমরা দেখবো। খুব সুন্দর শহর। ওখানে আমরা আউস নদীতে রিভার ক্রুজ করব, এবং ওখানে আমরা একটা গাইডেড ওয়াকিং ট্যুর করব এবং সারাদিন কাটাবো। অর্থাৎ স্টে টিউনড। অল দ্য বেস্ট।
দিব্যেন্দু এত কিছু জানে, আমি কিন্তু এক ফোঁটাও কিছু জানি না। মানে আমি শুনছিলাম, দিব্যেন্দু বলছিল, আমি ভাবছিলাম বাহ, তাহলে মানে খুব মানে বেশ ভালো একটা জায়গাতেই যাচ্ছি। আমার ভিডিওগুলো যেখানে দিব্যেন্দু নেই, আমি সেখানে ভাবছি আবার করে মনে হয় ওই ভিডিওগুলো করতে হবে যেখানে দিব্যেন্দু থাকলে পরে, তাহলে ওইখানকার হিস্টোরিক্যাল মানে প্লেসেস আর কি কি আছে সেইগুলো যাতে ও বলতে পারে। এবার সেটা আমারও নলেজ বাড়বে আর তোমাদেরও ভালো লাগবে। মানে আমার নিজেরও ভালো লাগছে, নলেজও বাড়ছে, তোমাদেরও নিশ্চয়ই সেটা ভালো লাগবে। ঠিক আছে, যাই হোক, এবারে আমরা যাচ্ছি স্টে টিউনড, যেটা দিব্যেন্দু বললো। চলো দেখা যাক কতটা সুন্দর লাগে আমাদের ওইখানে। আমরা এই সিটি ক্রুজের পরে এবারে আমরা বেরিয়েছি ওয়াকিং ট্যুরের জায়গায় যাব, ওয়াকিং ট্যুর করবো। এটা হলো সিটি সেন্টার, ইয়র্ক সিটি সেন্টার। ইয়র্ক সিটি সেন্টারটা মানে রাস্তায় পড়ছে, ওই ওয়াকিং ট্যুরের রাস্তায় পড়ছে। আমরা ওইখানে গিয়ে ওয়াকিং ট্যুরটা করব। চলো দেখা যাক ওইখানে কত কিছু হিস্ট্রি জানা যায়। এবারে জানি না কতটা ভিডিও নিতে পারবো কি না নিতে পারবো, কেননা যেহেতু গাইডটা বলবে আর এখানে অনেক কিছু ওরকম অ্যালাউড না, তাই জন্য দেখা যাক কতটা কি বলে না বলে। সেটা যাই হোক, অ্যাটলিস্ট জায়গাগুলো কি আর সেইটার প্রাধান্য কি ওর যদি ভিডিওতে না বলতে দেয়, অ্যাটলিস্ট আমি তো বলে দেবো তোমাদেরকে, কেননা আমি তো জানছি, তোমাদের বলে দেবো। তাই স্টে টিউনড, চলো দেখা যাক কতটা এনজয় করা যায় আর কতটা কিছু জানা যায়।
It was all countryside back then, of course, but there was a tribe that ran this part of England known as the Brigantes. It's one of the biggest Celtic tribes in Britain. Now, it's a husband and wife team that ran it towards the end, and they used to fight each other. So the Emperor Vespasian decided to order in the troops, and it was the 9th Legion. They marched up from what's now the city of Lincoln, 63 miles away. And in 71 AD, those Roman soldiers built the very first ever permanent settlement in this part of England. There's a 50-acre wooden fort. The Romans called it Iberacum, place of the yew trees, what that means. From that wooden fort you get the city that we're going to explore this afternoon. Now, by the 3rd century AD, we are England's second city. We're capital of the north. We grow up with a lot of special privileges and autonomy, just like London. So some of that changes during the reign of our Tudor kings and queens. I'll mention why a little bit later on for you. As a Roman fort, we are visited by 5 of these men, the Roman emperors. He was the last of them. Very briefly, the others were Hadrian. Hadrian's probably more famous for his wall in Britain, but that wall was ran from this fort. The administration was done here, and also supplies being sent to forts further north. We then have another emperor called Septimius Severus. He was the first North African Roman emperor. Came from Libya, Leptis Magnus. And he's here for 4 years. He died in York, and his ashes taken back to Rome by his son. His son came here as emperor too. His name is Caracalla. Nobody liked him when he came. He had them all beheaded, refusing to swear allegiance. That was their punishment. You then got Constantine I, or Chlorus. He's here for 2 years. He died in York. His ashes were sent back to Rome too, and that's the statue of his son, Constantine the Great, founder of Constantinople, of course, or Istanbul, as we call it today. So in 312 AD, he's back home in Italy. He's at a place called Milburn Bridge. That spans the Tiber. In front of him is an army of about 30,000 troops. He's outnumbered 2 to 1. The eve of a very important battle. The problem is he'd already lost 5 battles in a row. On the eve of each of those battles, he's prayed to a different god before he lost. So on the eve of the Battle of Milburn, he chose an illegal religion to pray to. It's called Christianity. Yeah, we're still throwing Christian into the amphitheatres at this point. But he's a Roman emperor, he can do what he likes. So he prayed to God and he won the battle. And on that basis, he holds the Edict of Milan and legalised Christianity throughout the entire Roman world. So this is kind of how he gets a foothold to become one of the world's larger religions, because he allows a little bit of religious tolerance in the Roman world and gives Christianity a foothold to become one of the larger religions. So we'll head this way. I'll tell you a bit about York Minster around this corner. One of the oldest jobs on the planet, of course, stonemasons. So it's a 4-year apprenticeship in philosophy and 1 job for life. They're using something called magnesian limestone. It's quarried 15 miles away from here, a place called Lancaster. But it's all cut out, the quarries by machines today, of course, but they do use traditional masons' methods to shape and carve everything. Like grotesque, like this chap with a frog in his mouth.
Yeah, gargoyles.
So yeah, if they know what the original looks like, they'll try and copy. Otherwise, it's purely imagination. So long as it scares away all those evil spirits from the cathedral, that's his job. So there's kind of religious connotations to them. He's got a frog out coming about his mouth, one of the plagues of Egypt. He's holding a fish in his hands, feeding the 5,000. The little man between his legs, that's pagan. It's a fertility symbol. It's a green man. You'll find that in the northeast of England quite a lot, that little symbol, to be honest. So that's this one here with the frog coming out of his mouth. You look between his legs, there's a little face.
And there's a fish also.
So today they use something called computer-aided design. So the bits that are underneath the overhang, they've been cut by machines, and then they shape and carve it using traditional mason's methods as well. So they like to leave the stone in the bad weather. It colours it, so it won't look too out of place by the time they put it into position. So the bit they're working on today is part of an 11-year project. It's only into its 3rd year. So they're cleaning, restoring and replacing as well. Yeah, so York Minster is the largest medieval Gothic cathedral you'll find north of the Alps. It's 1/10 of a mile long, 200 feet tall, and it boasts the largest concentration of medieval painted and stained glass windows in the world. So that's 128 windows, 3 million pieces of glass. Yeah, its correct title is the Cathedral and Metropolitical Church of St Peter's in York. So it does everything connected to the cathedral. Minster's Latin, monasterium, meaning place of learning. So it gets that title because it has a library attached to it. So it does both jobs even today. So when we say the largest cathedral north of the Alps, it's but the Gothic style is the spires and all the knobbly bits. However, if you ever go to Cologne in Germany on holiday, their tour guides there will be saying this is the largest medieval Gothic cathedral as well. Cologne, those finished in 1880, that's copied Gothic, not medieval. This one, 1220 to 1472. Cologne is larger. Lloyd's Quibbles, we call it, I think. So we're one of 10 teams that have dedicated teams working on them constantly, employed by the cathedral. It's not just the stone they're working on, all the medieval glass needs looking after too. So I'll go take you to the east window, show what they've been doing on there. This is the largest medieval painted and stained glass window in Britain. So it's 68 feet by 30 foot. It's known as the Alpha and Omega window. It tells you the story of Revelation, predominantly within its frames. The window itself cost £56 to build. Restored a few years ago for over 20 million. Yeah, 97,000 hours of restoration work. So that's cleaning the glass, replacing the lead, and it's double glazed as well. You spot the double glaze, it doesn't match the medieval window behind it. But the medieval glass is very fluid. It carries on flowing downwards over the centuries and it gets thicker at the bottom. So the weight of the window changes, so you've got to rebalance it. And that, all of that's part of that restoration work. So around the window and around the cathedral, you're going to see lots of plinths with no statues on. That's always the case for York Minster. And this version never had a steeple put onto the square tower either. An earlier version had one, it collapsed, so they've not tried it on this. But unlike other cathedrals, monasteries, abbeys, they're going to have their statues of medieval glass smashed during the Reformation or the English Civil Wars in the 1640s. York Minster survived both. Henry VIII wanted this building to represent the second highest office in his new Church of England. Well, he was already doing that job for the Catholic Church, so he takes the cathedral, its land and its wealth. Big political statement that, because it's basically saying to the Catholic Church, we are not needed. We've got our own religion now, Church of England. So big statement there. But Henry VIII didn't want what they call popery, no decoration. So no statues, no gold crosses or images inside at first. That bit comes back pretty soon afterwards though, to be honest. So it survives the Reformation. During the English Civil War, York was besieged for 3 months. When the city is finally captured by Parliament, Sir Thomas Fairfax, he brings his army into York and he tells them to leave the city alone. You don't sack York, you touch nothing. He was a Yorkshireman, he liked the place, so he protected the city. Because of that order though, York now boasts 83%, that's what's going there, 83% of all of England's medieval painted and stained glass windows within its city walls. And most of that is in the windows of the cathedral, so quite a rich and prosperous city. So it might have been England's second city. In theory, we should have had the highest office in the church, not the second. But when the Pope had seen a map of England when it was Catholic, he saw Canterbury was nearer London, so he gave them the top office. So again, political statement, they built York Minster larger than Canterbury, just to show who was England's second city and the most important. There we go. We'll head along this way. Yeah, we think that, you know, it was his duty to the ministry. Let's point out the building on the corner for you guys anyway, so grab a good view. This is the chapter house, and this is where the cathedral is. This is the Archbishop, where all those services and ceremonies are done. The oldest beams of wood in the roof of the chapter house date to the 900s, so almost the very origins of a religious building. So the very first minster, that was built in 627 AD for the baptism of King Edwin of Northumbria. He married Queen Ethelberga, the daughter of the King of Kent. And this is when England was lots of powerful kingdoms, those were two of the richer ones. His niece was St Hilda, she founded Whitby Abbey over on the east coast, so quite a big connection between the two as well. So York Minster today is the 6th building on the site. Roman headquarters, 4 minsters, and then your stone cathedral from the 1200s, so always pretty important to whoever's lived here. Now, at its height, a third of England was owned by the Catholic Church, so a lot of land and buildings around here are owned by the cathedral. Originally, all the money, documents and administration was done in the house that's over the wall there, the Treasurer's house. Yeah, so a bit more of a 17th century Dutch front on it today. So it's had a lot of changes through time, but that's where a lot of the important business for the cathedral was done. By the late 1800s, that is home to a very rich man. His name is Frank Green. Frank's father, Edward, invented the economizer, which is a bit like a recycling system for steam. He made steam engines, power stations more efficient. Not much of an engineer, that's kind of my understanding of it. So Frank Green only had the family fortune to spend in his lifetime, and he ploughs it into looking after a lot of the medieval buildings in York, but he also went digging in his garden looking for archaeology, and he was very successful. He found a Roman road. That road runs along the length of this wall. It's literally on the other side of it, so it goes about 3 meters underneath this black gate and into the cathedral. It was known as the Via Decumana, the rear entrance into the Roman headquarters. So you can see both ends of that Roman road in both museums, in the cathedral and the Treasurer's house. Yeah, Frank Green was rather eccentric. He didn't like having his washing and ironing done in York. He used to send it all the way down to London. He thought the servants were too lazy up here in the north. And if you ever go around the house, you'll see nails in the floorboards where he's marked out his furniture. So when his servants moved something, they knew exactly where they had to put it back. Yeah, it's very particular. He donated that house though to the National Trust when he retired down to the county of Somerset. It was their very first ever fully furnished property. And if you do like your stately homes, this one's well worth a little run around. Really interesting building. We're going to go down this nice cobbled street, so we'll head this way best we can.
Huh?
Cobalt Street.
Okay.
The street itself, this is Oglethorpe, very much connected to beer making. It's where the monks made all their alcohol back in the day. But if you can imagine, medieval streets in England used to be built out of long wooden frameworks. They're split into houses, and you've got thatched straw reed roofing on top of that. So when the Great Fire of London happened in 1666, it was really disaster waiting to happen. A quarter of the capital burned. So they banned thatched roofing in towns and cities. They make the streets wider, and the width would depend on how high you're allowed to build. But we also look over to the Netherlands, and this is what they came back with, the Dutch house. So the Dutch were building straight up, not with that step effect, which makes our upper floors go upwards and outwards. More importantly, they're building completely in brick. Now I know that sounds really simple, building in brick, but it takes the Great Fire of London to make us do this properly in the UK. Usually it was half brick and then wood and wattle and door, so highly flammable. By the 1680s, you got nice fire resistance buildings. So if you used to buy one of these, you're then entitled to some of the very first ever fire insurance policies. So you buy your insurance, you've got a plaque stick on your house with the name of the company on, and so if it's on fire, somebody runs along, tries to save your house. The downsides, well, if your neighbour's not insured, their house is going to be left to burn down. Simple as that. And there's more than one company. So you can imagine you paid your insurance, your plaque's on the house, it's on fire, somebody's going to run along with the water, they look at your plaque, oh, I don't work for that company, and off they go. So you've got to wait for the right people to turn up to put the fire out. This is why we ended up with nationalised fire brigades, kind of gets around all that, yeah. Something else you could do is also get very friendly with the people with the water tanks. You get them to hide around the corner while you set fire to your own house. Before it gets out of control, you're going to give them a shout to put the fire out. Then later on, you split the profit on that insurance policy with them. So yeah, insurance fraud, there you go, nothing changes in history really, even back then. So as you go around the country, predominantly in the towns and cities in Britain, most of the older buildings are going to be from what we call the Georgian period. So you've got 3 Georgian kings together, 1720 to 1830. Here. Oh no, it's really going to reverse into there, guys, alright. In some of the streets, they might have their windows bricked up as well due to a window tax we had. The more windows you have, the more tax you pay. So people start to knock them out and brick them up to save money. Daylight robbery, quite literally in that case, of course. One of the other ways to tell a Georgian building is to look on the drain pipes. The drain pipe coming from this white building here, 1774. So that's 4 years before Cook discovers Australia, 29 years after the Jacobite revolt in England, and a couple of years before the Declaration of Independence in the US. Let's give the historical context. So even the drain pipes are listed in York. So that's for that one, yeah, coming up. So there's always something to look up for in York. If you don't want to look at drain pipes, I'm going to show you some other things. So we'll head towards the end of this street and go left. In England alone at one time, but by the late 1800s, many places have knocked them down. You don't need medieval defences, of course, so we lost a lot of heritage. So by 1900, you've only got York, Chester and Southampton with their walls pretty much intact. Our walls are 2 3/4 miles, they're divided by the rivers. Chester's about 2 miles, there's a full circle. Southampton doesn't really survive the Second World War, to be honest, there's not a lot there today, but what makes York unique are the gateways. We call them bars in York. It's the Norman French word bar, barrier, bar the way, keep you out, excuse my pronunciation, but these are literally the only way in and out of this city till the late 1800s. All of the holes you'll see in our walls, including the 2 either side of all the bars as you go around York, they're made for traffic and people access. So the large one across the road here, for example, is made for the trams that used to drive around York until the 1920s. If you go down the railway station, you'll see loads of archways in the walls there. They were made for the steam locomotives to go in and out at the very first station as well. So lots of changes. Ways like this, we have 6 in York. The 4 major ones, they all had barbicans on the front, and that's why you've got the doorways halfway up these towers. So you can imagine there needs to be a walkway under the door. That goes as far as the traffic light on my right here. And it's a bit like a tunnel with no roof for barbican. So you knock on this doorway here, you walk into the space between the walls, so the soldiers are up there looking down at you, and then they're going to vet you. Why are you here? What are you trading? How long are you in York for? That sort of thing. If they're happy with you, they'll lift the portcullis. Can you see the teeth of the portcullis in the first archway, just there? And then there's a wooden doorway on the far arch, the first one we came into. So if they don't want you to come in, they just drop things on your head. Yeah, bricks, boulders, sticks, stones, boiled urine, anything they get their hands on. It's a deadly form of passport control. Probably the best way to look at a barbican, to be frank. So the most unique thing about this gateway are the statues on the top of the towers. These statues are the only statues built during the medieval period, 1450s. So the rest are Victorian, the statues on our gate. But these ones are known as the Wild Men of York. They're holding rocks in their hands, and legend has it they come alive and drop them on your head if they don't want you to come in. Everyone's welcome today, so they've not done that for years. So yeah, so we're okay today. Now, it's the main gateways like this where we used to stick the heads of traitors as well. So if you committed treason against the Crown of England, you brought to one of these to have your head chopped off. Once they've done that, they used to boil it in water for a few hours. They then dip it in tar, put it on a big stick and then tie it to the walls as warning for all to see. And they could be there for 9-10 years at a time, some of these heads. Pretty grim sight. So the main gateways for heads of traitors in York were Micklegate Bar, that's the London entrance, and Bootham Bar, that's the northeast. Bootham, that was also known as the Scottish Gateway, because for many years anybody from Scotland had to have written permission from the Lord Mayor of York to enter the city. They had to show those documents at Bootham. So you might hear some rumours you can shoot Scotsmen from the walls of this city on certain days of the year of arrows. I'm afraid murder's always been murder, but that myth probably originates from that gateway all those years ago. So we're going to cross over, ladies and gentlemen. We're just going to go around the corner of this keystone place here. The walls of York, they do come under threat quite a few times. We have Scottish raids on York. Scotland never attacked the city, but they do raid the outskirts. Again, it was the Scottish Gate near Bootham Bar. That was done by King David I of Scotland and a man called Robert the Bruce. Robert won the Battle of Bylands 20 miles away. Just watching this car now, so everyone's leaving at the same time. Robert won the Battle of Bylands 20 miles away and chases Edward II all the way back to York, and he nearly captured the king. But when he fails, it was scorched earth policy. They raid and pillage the local area for any wealth or food to take home and burnt the rest down. I do like to mention a man called William Wallace as well. He never came here, no matter what Mel Gibson and Wikipedia might tell us today. We never got his body parts either. They went to Perth, Stirling, Newcastle and London got his head. So yeah, but the biggest threat to the walls of York, 1798, it was York Council. They wanted to knock every bit down and get rid of it. And a lot of people thought the walls were trapping typhoid, cholera, deadly diseases. So if you knock the walls down, the fresh air will help blow it all away. Nonsense, of course, but strangely what they believed in back then. Fortunately, somebody said no. His name was William Etty. You'll find his statue near our art gallery today. And he petitioned Parliament with the author Charles Dickens many years later and was very successful. So the Victorians embraced their history and heritage. So they're the ones that built the walkway and the stairs onto the walls that we use today. The medieval walkway was very thin and narrow. It's hard to tell where the original would be today. The castle shape in the wall here, the crenellations, they make wider and deeper so the rich ladies and gentlemen can get a nicer look off them on their holidays, and they plant daffodils on the embankment. So basically what they're doing is decorating it for the tourists, because when the railways arrived in York in the 1840s, there was no longer a 4-day journey by horse and carriage from London. It was 15 hours on those first trains. Revolutionary. Get here in a day. Perfect. So York becomes one of the most visited cities outside of London, and it still is today. 9 million visitors from all the way around the world last year, for example. So that's 3 times more than the island of Malta getting tourism a year. They just get the weather down there, of course. Yeah, and the seafood in the Mediterranean, to mention 2 other things. But so yeah, really important. The railways are the very first boost to York's economy since the Wars of the Roses in the 1400s. York's on the wrong side of those wars, and the Tudors, the likes of Henry VIII, they're going to deliberately destroy the economy of the city to ensure it's never rich and influential again. So even though the families have married into each other, they still get rid of the economic power base of their rivals. So like putting sanctions on a country, that's what the Tudors do to York. They basically executing all the rich people that don't go on their side. They're blockading trade, diverting it. So by the time Henry VIII dies, we are no longer England's second city, but we're not out the story straight away. The most unique thing about this stretch of wall is up until the tower, it's the only bit that's built directly on top of the Roman medieval fort. the Roman fort wall. So lots of different changes in the defences. When the Romans abandoned Britain in 410 AD, you go about 40 to 50 years with nobody really living here, apart from a few local people who didn't go home with the Romans. So by the year 500, this is a Saxon city, and it was known as Ethelwick. So Ethelwick was trading with the Middle East, North Africa, Mediterranean, mainland Europe, and York had the largest inland port in Europe in that period, all the way up into the late 1200s. So it's the River Ouse that goes to the North Sea. That's about a 55-kilometre journey via the Trent and the Humber. And that's the way the Vikings will come. 866, it was Ivar the Boneless who captures York for the Vikings. They call the city Jorvik, and that's where you eventually get the word York from. So the Vikings are in York longer than anywhere else in England. They're here 200 years. So our defence has changed. The Saxons, they build a wooden palisade along the line where the wall stands today. So they make the city go from 50 acres to 268 acres altogether. That Saxon defence is then changed by the Vikings. The Vikings build a 20-foot high earthen defence system around Jorvik. So the grass embankment you see against our walls today, wherever you go, is what's left of the Viking defence. And then your medieval walls have been built on top of that. So the walls in York go between 12 and 25 feet tall, depends on where they needed the height. But yeah, we're the only city in Britain built on an earthwork like this one. So we're going to head a bit further down the road, so we'll just vacate this car park a little bit. Yeah, so this church is St Cuthberts. He was very much connected to Lindisfarne, one of the earlier Christian centres in England. He was ordained at York Minster for his role at Durham Cathedral, St Cuthbert, where he spent a lot of his life. The church itself dates to the late 1100s. It's hard to date accurately because obviously it's mostly stone, but we do know the back of the church has been built out of the Roman fort. The bell tower is Saxon. It has the normal castle shape crenellation on the very top of the tower, so again a bit of a mixture of historical periods. But if you can imagine, when the Vikings and Saxons are converting to Christianity, they're still following a lot of their old beliefs and superstitions. So they build into their churches something called a devil's door, and that's a small black door towards the back end there. So the devil's door would be used to be during a baptism, basically, because they believe that when the holy waters poured on the baby's head and the child cried, they thought that that was the devil leaving the baby. Obviously you don't want the devil in your church, so the door's open so you can get out, and once it's gone you're left with little angels, of course. Very nice story, which is all it is, of course, but in reality you baptise your child outside. They're not a Christian, so they're not going in that church yet, so you baptise them here. The door's more of a symbol. You then do a procession around the whole church, like a cleansing ceremony, and then when you're at the front door, the priest halts that procession, and they did something called salting the baby. They used to place salt into the child's mouth. That's going to get rid of the devil. That'll go to throw it over your shoulder eventually, thank goodness. But then they'll whisper the liturgy into the baby's ear, take the child inside, and then confirm them as a Christian in the church. So it's a very pagan influence, the very early days of a religious baptism. And that is very, very deliberate. Because you imagine these people are accepting a new religion, a new way of life almost, the way they've got to practice it and go to church on a Sunday and things like that. It's all very new. So you allow them a lot of their old ways. It prevents rebellion to start with, and every empire's done this from Rome to Britain onwards, probably, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's just a way to keep people happy while you absorb them into your culture. And that's the way it works. Conquered England at speed during the invasion of 1066. The Moxie Mound, the Bailey's where all the houses of the castle were, wooden castle keep on top. The Normans, they bring the very first keeps across the English Channel flat packed for speed of conquest. Oh, you've been brought my favourite biscuits.
এখানে আমরা চা টেস্ট করছি এখন, চকলেট অ্যান্ড মিন্ট, স্ট্রবেরি, লিচি। এটা আমরা আছি শ্যাম্বেলস রোডে। শুভ্রার মুখ চোখ দেখে বুঝতে পারছো কেমন। ফ্রেন্ডস, আজকের ভিডিওটা এইখানেই আমরা শেষ করছি। আশা করি তোমাদের ভাল লেগেছে। ওই লাইটনিং শো ভ্যানকোভের বা ওয়াক ইন ট্যুর বা সেই আমাদের ক্রুজ, যেটাই আমরা নিয়েছি আজকে, আশা করি তোমাদের ভাল লেগেছে। আর ইয়র্ক সিটিটাও আমরা দেখলাম। অবশ্যই কমেন্ট করে জানিও কেমন লেগেছে তোমাদের। অ্যান্ড ইফ ইউ হ্যাভ মোর সাজেশনস প্লিজ ডু লেট মি নো, উইল ট্রাই টু ইমপ্রুভ লাইকওয়াইজ। তা আজকের জন্য এইখানেই ভিডিওটা শেষ করছি। দিব্যেন্দু, শুভ্রা, সবার তরফ থেকে
আমাদের খুব ভালো লেগেছে এই ট্যুরটা।
সবাই ভালো থাকবে, আবার দেখা হবে খুব শীঘ্রই। বাই,
চিয়ার্স, বাই।